Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarech, we will be continuing with Perek Daled in the Rambam's Hilchos Yesodei Hatorah, the fourth chapter in the Rambam's Laws of the Foundations of Torah, in his Sefer Mada, his book of knowledge. We left off yesterday discussing 4 different types of matter in this world, which he called different types of bodies, gufin. They were fire, wind, water, and earth. And in Mitzvah Hashem, in today's Perek, we're going to continue discussing these 4 matters and how they make up physical beings and what separates one physical being from another. And this is the completion of what the Rambam calls Ma'aseh Bereishis, the study of the creation. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we should learn it with much hatzlacha. Halacha Aleph. Arba gufim ha'elu. These 4 bodies, shehein eish v'ruach u'mayim va'aretz, which are fire and wind, water and earth, heim yisaydes kol hanivraim lemata min harakia. They are the foundations of all the creations under the heavens. V'chol sheyamei adam uvehema v'oif v'remesh v'dog v'tzamach u'matachas v'avonim toivu margolios u'shar avnei binyan v'harim v'gushei afar. And anything, whether it is a man, an animal, a bird, a crawling creature, a fish, a plant, a metal, a precious stone, a pearl, any type of building stone, a mountain, or a lump of earth, hakol golmai mechubar me arba yisaydes ha'elu. The body of all of these entities is a combination of these 4 elements. Nimtzu kol agufim shelamata min harakia chutz me arba'a yisaydes ha'elu. What comes out is that all beings, all creations under the earth, besides these 4 beings, mechubarim migoylam v'tzura, they all are connected to matter and form. V'goylam shalahem mechubar ma'arba'a yisaydes elu, and their matter is a combination of these fundamental elements. And these fundamental elements, however, are a combination of matter and form only as they exist in this level of Yuli, which we alluded to yesterday. Halacha Beis, the Rambam is going to explain some of the characteristics of these 4 elements. Derech ha'esh v'ruach li'es mahal chom mimata mitabor ha'aretz. It's the way of fire and wind to move upwards from the center of the earth, lamaila, above, klapi harakia, in regards to the sky, v'derech hamayim va'aretz li'es mahal chom mitachas harakia lamata la'emtza, and it's the nature of earth and water to go downwards to the center, she'emtza harakia hu hamata she'ein lamata mimenu, because the lowest point, which is in the center of the earth, is lower than everything else. Ve'in hilucham bedatam v'lei bechaftzam ela minhag shenikba bohem v'teva shenitba bohem. And this pattern that they go up or down is not due to any sort of conscious matter, but rather it's a nature that they were given when they were created. Teva ha'esh cham yavesh. It's the nature of fire to be hot and dry. Vehu kal mekulam, and it's the lightest out of all the elements. V'hadruach cham lach, and the wind is warm and moist. V'hamayim karim lachim. Water is cold and moist. Va'aretz yevesha kara, and the earth is hard and dry. V'hikveda mikulam, and it is the hardest out of the 4. V'hamayim kal mimena, and the water is lighter than the earth. Lefikach nimtza lamaila ala aretz, and that's how it ends up that the water is found above the earth. V'haruach kal min hamayim, and wind is lighter than water. Lefikach hu merachif al pnei hamayim, therefore it hovers above the water. Va'esh kal min haruach, and the fire, which we said was the lightest, is even lighter than that wind. Umepnei shahem yisaydes l'chol gufim shetachas harakia, and since these are the fundamentals of all the bodies below the sky, yimatze kol guf guf me adam uvehema v'chayev v'oif v'dog v'tzamach u'matachas v'even galmai mechubar me'esh v'ruach u'mayim v'afar. All of the beings, man, animal, bird, fish, plant, metal, stone, are a combination of fire, wind, water, and earth. Va'arba'asam yisarvu biyachad, and these 4 are combined together. V'yishtane kol echad mehem be'es ha'eruv, and they all look different at the time that they are mixed together. Ad shiyamatze ha'mechubar me'arbaton ein doim le'echad mehem kishehu levadoi. So what we have is these 4 elements on a basic level are combined to create a being. And once they're combined in this unique way, that being doesn't look like any of the 4 elements. Ve'ein b'ma'arav mehen afilu chelak echad, shehu eish b'fnei atzma, oy mayim b'fnei atzma, oy eretz b'fnei atzma, oy ruach b'fnei atzma. And not only that, but these four combinations, right, they don't resemble any of the elements if they were on their own state. But really, when they come together to create a new being. Meaning, if you have someone, which the Rambam is going to explain in examples, but if you have somebody that is made some sort of being that's created more out of fire, once all four elements are mixed together to create that being, there is no way of tracking the fire. That new creation is not going to have within it the elements of fire or water or wind or earth, but rather it's going to be a new creation in its entirety. V'chol guf v'guf hamechubar ma'arbatan. Every single body is a combination of these four elements. Yimatei b'kar v'chaim lach v'yovish ka'echad, a combination of cold and warmth, moistness and dryness. Aval yesh mehem gufim sheyeh bohem chazakim yisaid ha'esh. However, there are going to be some beings which have more of a powerful connection to fire. Kimoi ba'alei nefesh chaya, for example, creatures with living souls. Lefikach yirah bohem ha'chaim yoser. Therefore, they have a higher temperature. V'yesh mehem gufim sheyeh bohem chazaka misaid ha'aretz. And there are going to be other types of creatures that are going to have a more powerful concentration of earth, like a stone. Lefikach yirah bohem hayovish harbe. Therefore, what we're going to see is that they are more dry. Therefore, you might have one body which is warmer than another body which itself is warm. Or another body that is drier than a different body which is also dry. Some bodies are only going to be noticed as cold alone. And some bodies that are going to be only recognized by their moistness. And there are going to be others where the cold and the dryness are equally noticeable. Or the cold and the moist together equally. Or the warmth and the dryness equally. Or the warmth and the moist together equally. Based on the predominant matter found within the mixture. You're going to be able to see an element that is expressed in the body from the mixture of all of these elements. Halacha Gimel, if you remember earlier on, the Rambam described how all beings on our planet are created and also expire, and now the Rambam is going to talk about this expiration process. Halacha Gimel v'chol hamechubar me'arba'a yesodei elu. All beings created from these four matters, lahem hu nifrad basayif, they're going to end up separating back into these. Yesh shehu nifrad la'achar yamim achadim v'yesh shehu nifrad la'achar shanim rabis. There are going to be some that go back to these four elements pretty quickly, and others that go after a long time. All that are creation out of a combination of these four must go back to these four. And even gold and rubies will also decompose and return to their fundamental element. Some of every being will return to fire, and some to water, and some to wind, and some to earth. Halacha Daled, the Rambam asks, so the Rambam asks, if every single entity will decompose and go back to these four matters, why was Adam told that you're going to return to the dust? So the Rambam answers, Lifi Sherov bin Yonai min ha'afar, because the major matter that makes up the matter of man is the dust. And seemingly this contradicts what we said in Halacha Beis about man being made out of fire, and they don't know the answer. When every being decomposes, they don't decompose directly to these four elements. Rather, one being becomes another being, and then that turns into something else as it decomposes. But at the end of the day, they all return to their elements. And it turns out that there is a constant state of returning to these elements in a cycle. Halacha Hey, the Rambam is going to speak about how these four elements can turn one into the other. These four elements are constantly turning into one another at all times during the day. Miktasan, like kol gufan, a part of it, not the entire thing. What's an example of this? So that Rambam explains. Miktas ha'aretz hakrevim minamayim, if you have earth and it's close to water, mishtanes umispeireres v'nasis miyam, it's able to dissolve and become into water. V'chein miktas hamayim hasmuchim laruach mishtanim umismas misin v'hoivin ruach. Another portion of water, right, which is close to wind, can evaporate and then become wind. V'chein haruach miktasei hasamach la'esh mishtana umischaylo v'nasa esh. Wind, which is close to fire, could go through a type of changing process and also become fire. V'chein ha'esh miktasei hasamach la'ruach mishtana umiskanes v'nasa ruach. Fire, which is close to wind, could go through a change and become wind. V'chein haruach miktasei hasamach la'mayim mishtana umiskanes v'nasa mayim. And wind, which is close to water, could change and contract and become water. V'chein hamayim miktasan hasamach la'aretz mishtana umiskanes v'nasa aretz. It also, water could also contract and become earth. V'shinoi zeh, and this cycle of changing, ma'at, is little by little, ulefi oirech hayamim, over a long period of time. V'ein kol ha'yisoid mishtana ad she'yaseh kol hamayim ruach kol haruach eish. In addition, the Rambam adds that no entire element can change completely. For example, not all water will become wind, nor will all wind become fire. Why? Because because it's impossible for one of these four fundamental elements to be nullified. Rather, a portion of fire will change to wind and a portion of wind to fire. Similar, you see between each of the pairs of the four a change that will go and come back in a unceasing, constant, recurring cycle. And these changes of matter happen through the rotation of the sphere, the galgal, which we spoke about in more depth yesterday. And it's these revolutions that cause the four to combine. And it's the combination of these matters that create the form of man and living animals, plants, stones, and metals. And Hashem gives each of the creations a body and a form appropriate to its level through the 10th level of angels, which we spoke about a few days ago, which are called the Ishim, the lowest level of Malachim. The Rambam says we will never be able to see a form without matter or matter without a form. And the only reason that we're able to separate these two is that we know in our hearts, we know that we are attached through a type of matter and a form. And we also know that our bodies are a combination of these fundamental elements. And bodies whose matter is simple and only contains one type of matter, and forms which have no matter, cannot be seen by the eye. Rather, they're only discernible, aka by the eye of the heart, meaning we just experience their existence, appreciate their existence, but we just don't see them. In the same way that we can experience the existence of the master of anything, even though we don't see him without our eyes. So what we're saying here is that all physical experiences of these four characteristics, these four matters, are going to be seen by the eye. Anything else that isn't a combination of these four, like we said, for example, the malachim, etc., the only way that they're recognized is through our knowledge in our heart. Halacha ches, the Rambam is now going to speak about the nefesh. Nefesh kol basar hitzurase shenasan lo yakel. The soul of all flesh is the form that it was given to by God, called nefesh. Va'adas hayisera hamitzuya benafshe shel adam hitzuras adam hashalom bedatoi. And this extra dimension, which is found in the soul of a man, is the form of man who is perfect in his knowledge. And this is what it means when it says in the Torah, Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmusenu. Let's make man in our image and in our likeness, which the Rambam is now going to explain what that means. Kleimar, which means to say, Shetiyak, loy tzura, hayoidas, umaseges, hadeus she'ein lohem goylam ad sheyid malahan. Meaning, let's create a form. Who knows and comprehends ideas that are not material, like the angels, who are form without body, until that man could be like them. This doesn't mean that the body of the body perceived by the eye, meaning the mouth and the nose and the cheeks, that they're a remainder of the structure of the body. That's called ta'er, which literally means shape. And it's not the soul found within every living thing, which allows a person to eat and to drink, to reproduce, to feel and to think. Rather, what are we talking about? We're talking about knowledge in the form of a soul, and that's what the pasuk's talking about. And we have many times that these forms are called nefesh or ruach, and in the next halacha we're going to learn about neshama, nefesh, ruach, and neshama. But you have to keep in mind that these are just names, and each name is a different, has different characteristics, and therefore you have to be careful that when a person lumps the three together, that they are not giving the wrong name to the wrong characteristic. Halacha tes ein tzuras hanefesh hazais b'chuberes mina yesodis kidei. This soul is not a combination of the fundamental elements, which it will ultimately decompose to. Nor does it come from the neshama, so that it would require the neshama as the neshama requires the body. Rather, it's from Hashem in heaven. So therefore, when the matter of the body, which is comprised of these four elements, decomposes, the say Avid and Neshama, and the Neshama ceases to exist, because that Neshama exists only together with the body, and requires the body for all its needs. This form will not be cut off, because the form doesn't require the Neshama for its deeds. Rather, it knows and comprehends knowledge which is above its matter, and it knows the creator of all things. This is what Shlomo HaMelech says, that the dust will return to the earth as it originally was, and the ruach, quote unquote, will return back to God who granted it. So what we're saying is that this ruach, or nefesh, is completely interdependent from the neshama, and the neshama is completely dependent with the guf, which is completely dependent on the four yesodis, the four matters that the entire lowly earth is created from. Halacha Yud, we're going to talk about that which I mentioned in my introduction to chapter 3 and 4, all the different topics and ideas that we spoke about here, it's like a drop in a bucket, and the very deep concepts. However, don't think that they're even close to as deep as the concept that we discussed in the first two chapters. And this, which we just explained in the last two chapters, is what is called Ma'aseh Bereishis. And just like we said regarding Ma'aseh Merkava, the Rambam says that the early sages made a commandment that these ideas should not be taught in public, rather they should be taught to one individual, and only one individual alone. Halacha Yud Aleph, the Rambam asks, what's the difference between Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereishis? So the Rambam answers, the difference is that Ma'aseh Merkava shouldn't be taught to even one person if he doesn't contain the intellect to actually understand them. And the Rambam brings he alludes to the Gemara in Chagiga, which talks about two groups of sages that make a deal with one another. One knows Ma'aser Bereshis and one knows Ma'aser Merkava, and they say, if you teach us Ma'aser Bereshis, we'll teach you Ma'aser Merkava. So they teach Ma'aser Bereshis, and then the scholars that agreed to teach Ma'aser Merkava back out of their agreement. And the Rambam explains that it wasn't based on hard feelings, but that this was the rule, that they didn't feel like the other ones were at the level to be exposed to these things. The Inyan Ma'aser Bereshis, however, in comparison, Ma'aser Bereshis, melamdin oisai liyachid, afal pi she'ena mevin oisai. Midaita, you could explain it to one person even if he's incapable of comprehending it. Umaydian oisai kol sheyachol leida midvarim elu, and you could try and explain to him everything you know about these matters. So then the question becomes, why do we not teach these matters publicly? The reason why is because not every person contains the knowledge necessary to grasp all the interpretations and explanations of these matters in a complete way. So you'll have a reality where there's someone, a passerby, who hears these public sermons, for example, and it's just going to lead to confusion in his Yiddishkeit, which even if somebody doesn't comprehend them on an individual level, there isn't as big of a fear that this might happen. And finally, Halacha Yud Beis, Bizman she'adam isbainin midvarim ha'elu, when a person meditates on these matters, umakir kol haberuim, mim'alach v'galgal v'adam v'kiyotzebai, and recognizes all the creations, the angels and the spheres, and the man and everything else. And he sees the wisdom of the Creator, Holy One, blessed be He, in all of these creations. He will add love to his God. So his soul is going to thirst, and his flesh is going to long for love with Hashem. And he's going to be in awe and in fear from his humble, lowly base. When he compares himself to one of the great and holy bodies. And then on a higher level, when he compares himself to the pure forms, which are separated from matter and don't contain any connection to it, not connected at all to matter. He's going to see himself as a vessel just filled with embarrassment and shame, empty and lacking. Halacha Yud Gimel, v'inyanei arba prakim elu, shebechamesh mitzvahs ha'elu, these 4 chapters content, which discuss these 5 mitzvahs, this is what the sages called the pardes, like it says, 4 entered into the pardes, which literally means the orchard. And this, of course, talking about the famous Gemara, where Ben Azai and Ben Zayma and Acher and Rabbi Akiva entered into this pardes, and Rabbi Akiva gave them a warning. He said, if you see these type of marble stones, don't say, water, water. And then each single one of them did something else. Ben Azai looked at the Shechina and then he died. And then Ben Zayma looked and he became crazy. And Acher went and he was cut off because he became a heretic. And Rabbi Akiva was the only one who was able to enter and to leave in this level of peace. But the Rambam continues, even though they were great sages like Kulam, Hayu Bahen, Kayach, Leida, Lahase, Kol Advarim, Al Buryan, they were not able to understand and comprehend all of these matters in totality. And I don't think the Rambam says that it's proper for someone to, aka stroll in this orchard, unless he filled his belly with bread and meat, which of course is a metaphor to Torah study. And what is this bread and meat? It's to know what is permitted and what is not permitted. And similarly with regard to other mitzvahs. And now the Rambam quotes the Gemara that says, even though there were some sages that called these type of Isser v'Heter and mitzvahs, also known as Havayis Tabayah v'Rava, they called them Davar Katan, meaning the small thing. And said, what is considered the great thing? That's Ma'aser Merkava. Davar Katan, Havayis Tabayah v'Rava, and the small thing is these back and forths of Abayah and Rava, meaning the Isser v'Heter, etc. Afal Pichein, Ru'uyin Hein Lakdimon. Even so, it's fitting to give them precedent. Shehen Miyashvin Date Shel Adam Trila, because they settle within a person's mind first. Now, I would like to add that there are many, many different explanations of this Talmud passage that says that Havayis, the Abaye v'Rava, are a davar cotton in comparison to Ma'aseh Merkava. There are some of the Rishonim that outright reject the Rambam. And one shot that I once heard, which I think is a good shot, is to say that what makes something davar gadol, what makes it such a great thing, is when they're able to look at the davar cotton, quote unquote, look at the Havayis, the Abaye v'Rava, and see Ma'aseh Merkava. They're able to look at the mundane and see the inner pneumius of it all. V'oit shehem hatoiva hagdoila shashpi HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyeshuva olam hazeh kidei linchol chaye olam haba. Also, they are the great good which Hashem, blessed be He, has granted to allow for the stable living of man within this world, and to get the world to come. The Afshar shiyadei makoil katan v'gadol ish v'isha ba'lev rachav u'ba'lev katzar, and therefore we could say that it's all able to be learned, the great and the small davar katan v'davar gadol, by either a man or a woman, or someone who has large knowledge or someone has small knowledge. All of it is attainable.